So today we'll be discussing human rights and Australia's treatment of refugees, and we'll be mainly looking at the current state of and future prospects for refugee policy and practice. As mentioned, my name is Jeanine, and before I introduce the panel, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today, the Wiradjuri people of the Kulin Nation. I was born stateless, and I came to this country as a Palestinian refugee, and I became Australian in the year 2000. And if it wasn't for my family being welcomed in Australia, I wouldn't have had access to healthcare and education and freedom and all of the basic human rights that I grew up having access to. So for me, similar to quite a few refugees, while I was a victim of colonisation in my homeland, here I'm the benefactor of separate colonialism, and I think that's important for us to acknowledge. So without further ado, I will introduce the panel. So I'll start on the left. So we've got Katie Robertson, who is the Director of Legal Advocacy at the Human Rights Law Centre and leads the Centre's work advocating for the rights of refugees and people seeking asylum. Katie has extensive strategic litigation experience, focusing particularly on Australia's treatment of refugees. She has run a number of strategic litigation cases on behalf of refugees living in immigration detention, ranging from children to newborns to those receiving inadequate medical care. Katie also has experience advocating for the rights of refugees in the community, humanitarian and political sectors. Katie also has broad experience outside of her work with refugees, ranging from representing Aboriginal clients living in remote communities to working at the extraordinary chambers of the Courts of Cambodia as part of the legal team representing victims of the Khmer Rouge. So please give it up to Katie. So next we've got David Mejia-Canales. Is that good?
That's spot on.
Is a community lawyer who works to turn our system of laws into a system of justice, particularly for those most impacted by injustice. David was the main author of Something for Them, meeting the support needs of LGBT young people who are recently arrived refugees and asylum seekers. The report focuses on understanding and addressing the experiences and needs of queer refugees and asylum seekers in Australia. Please give it up to David. And then on my left, we've got Shukufa Tahiri, who is a policy officer with Refugee Council of Australia. Her work involves policy analysis, research and advocacy on issues affecting people seeking asylum and refugees. She is a secretariat of the Refugee Communities Advocacy Network, a refugee-led organisation that aims to embed grassroots refugee voices in policy decision-making and public discourse. She is also one of the executive directors of Activism Society that helps fund the education of girls, youth and children in Afghanistan and Pakistan. In 2017, Amnesty International recognised Shukufa as one of the 15 women championing human rights in Australia. The Australian Financial Review also recently named her one of 2018's 100 Women of Influence in Australia. Please give it up for Shukufa. Cool, so I'll start off nice and broad. So I might ask as a first question, what do each of you think are the most pressing challenges facing refugees in Australia today? Can I start? Yeah.
Yep. Okay, way to start with the big questions. My view on this is one word: politics. So I think we've seen in Australia, particularly over the last few years, but I'd say more broadly over the last 2 decades in particular, politicians deliberately use the treatment of people seeking asylum in Australia as a political football for political gain. And I'd also argue that in large part, the situation we're currently seeing in Australia, but in particular, particularly offshore, is an issue driven by politics that needs a political solution. And over the years, that's been pushed onto the legal sector to deal with and the legal sector to resolve. But I am very much of the view that ultimately we can run cases, we can build movements, we can run campaigns, but until there is a political solution and political leadership on this issue, we will not see systemic change we need. So I'll start with that.
Yeah, I agree with that, absolutely. I also think that the way that we talk about people is a problem. When we talk about people seeking refuge, we we talk about them as their one legal transaction. That's what they are. They're refugees. They're not people. And I know that absolutely the law and the political situation needs to change. But so does but I think what's going to start that process or speed it up is the way that we talk about people. Because reducing them as a legal transaction is really disingenuous to them and to us and to the legal system, I think. So the way that we talk about people needs to change. The way that we talk about people who seek asylum needs to change. Not just here. I mean, they're locking up children in the United States in cages and getting away with it. We're doing exactly the same thing here. So I absolutely agree that the way that we talk that our politics needs to change, our laws need to change. But also the one thing, and that's something that we barely have any control of as lawyers. We sometimes are just in there like pulling people out of a river instead of like stopping them from going in there. But the one thing that we absolutely do have control of though is the language that we use and the way that we refer to people. And instead of framing this as a left or right issue, it's actually an issue about what's right and what's wrong. And I absolutely think, if anything else, the language that we use can really start kicking off some of that change that we want to see.
I would have to actually add to what David said. It's a difficult job to add to what they've just elaborated on. But I suppose if I have to name policy issues, they're just too many to name. What I would like to actually elaborate on is really going back to the fundamental issue, which is where did this policy issues that are subjected to refugees and people seeking asylum came from. And I'd have to concur with David that it comes from the basic framing of how they are portrayed and put out to the public, media, and then scrutinized by public. And I think it always goes back to the binary that's being used, legitimacy and illegality. When these two friends are the only friends, I think the whole debate in asylum seekers and refugees is too black and white. And I think that there's no gap of space left almost to humanize the cause of asylum seekers and refugees. And that's what's really at the root of all of these deterrence policy. The fact that it has been legitimized by the public really does go back to how asylum seekers have been framed as illegal arrivals. And they have been framed as groups of asylum seekers who come to Australia and threaten the economy that exists in Australia. And also, there's a huge misunderstanding about the cost issue. If you have to go and actually analyze how much it costs for us to administer this whole policy landscape that the government has created, it far outweighs by tenfold in terms of how much it costs asylum seekers to be Australian. But in terms of the specific policy issues, lack of family reunion for people on TPB and shared who are recognized as genuine refugees under our domestic laws, but also people reaching visas whose status are not yet determined. The whole temporary protection regime is, taking people into the brink of mental health issues. A lot of cost actually comes from the human cost that these policies have created through means of TPB, through means of unfair asylum processes, and through means of offshore detention and detention.
So we might come back to the broad systemic policies. But something that I was hearing was this idea of politicians co-opting this broad brush narrative and this language around refugees and asylum seekers. What do you guys think should, or how do you guys think change should be driven in terms of the narrative that's used in the language and this broad brush narrative that's currently being held?
I think it's a good point in that I think everything we've all mentioned between the three of us is actually linked. So if we are to actually reshape the political narrative, the political reality in Australia, it has to start with the very people that elect our politicians, and that intrinsically involves reshaping and rethinking the way we talk about these issues, who has a voice in this space, and how we think of it more broadly. And I can think of a really, a positive example last year in terms of the Nauru campaign, which many people in this and their organisations were involved in. That was a really fantastic campaign involving a number of different organisations, strategies, different players. But what that campaign led to was polling late last year that showed 79% of Australians no longer supported children being held in immigration detention on Nauru. And the outcome of that campaign was that we pushed public opinion so far that even this government and Minister Dutton, you might hear him actually, I heard my friend Kelly a couple of months ago, claiming credit for getting kids off Nauru, and as you can appreciate, I nearly choked on my piece of toast. But it actually is a really good example of that. When we push this narrative, when we reshape this narrative, we have the power to demand that even the most punitive politicians have to take action.
I think that also, to add to that campaign, one of the reasons it was so successful was that the campaign actually had a human face. We had pictures of babies all over the media. And so I think the empathy that's created, the opportunity that's given to the public to then connect with the victims of these policies is significant. And with most of our refugee discussions and the whole public discourse, that public facing does not exist. Either deliberately or actually because there are inherent risks with exposing a case of refugees and migrants. It really has serious consequences for individual cases, especially when they're pending approval by the minister. Given that the whole nature of our immigration system and the grant of visas can be extremely discretionary, that's a risk that is inherent. But I suppose humanizing refugees, humanizing children was a very important aspect of it.
Mejia-Canales mentioned in an earlier session that people closest to the pain should be closest to the power. And I was just wondering if any of you had any views on how that would manifest in the refugee sector in a way that isn't these brown or vulnerable refugees being saved by these white privileged lawyers, and how we can kind of dismantle this kind of us and them rhetoric.
Wow.
Yeah, sorry, one heavy really quick.
I like that. You're right, and it's, I think there's a difference between sympathy and empathy, obviously, when it's that hope. But empathy is kind of what you want to be cultivating in people. I genuinely believe that most people don't want to see children in cages. I think that is fundamental. And I sometimes really struggle with the idea of humanizing anybody, because when we're human already, we don't need to prove ourselves anymore to you. It's really hard as a brown person. I came here fleeing the war in El Salvador in '89. I came here knowing the war, like that's what I grew up with. I grew up with no war zone. And there's nothing that I hate more than bleeding all over the floor for white folks to get them to see me as a human being. Because it's really tiring. And it's really exhausting to have to do that. And then you go off and you become a transaction in people's eyes again. And then you have to sort of tell your own story again and again and again, to the point that it becomes kind of like oppression Disneyland for people. So I think that yes, Lee is a wonderful lawyer from the Human Rights Law Centre, and she's right, the people who are closest to the pain need to be closest to the power. That is, I think, a given. But we also have to take stock of our ego, whether it be organisational or actually pulling up a chair in the middle of yourself and acknowledging that a lot of us, well, not me, but a lot of you have a lot of white privilege, and with that comes responsibility. Because there's a lot of people in here, in this room, that are not here, that need to be here, but they won't ever be here. We've been talking about this for years. And in fact, the second thing that the Parliament of Australia passed was the White Australia policy. The first one was for taxes. So this is entrenched. I mean, Aboriginal people have been saying this for centuries. Refugees have been saying this for decades. It's hard out here But they don't listen to us because of the way we look or because we're a legal transaction for a lot of people. And some people just flat out don't care. And that's fine, I can deal with people not caring. It's the polite sympathy that I have a problem with. So I think, please continue having these conversations in your circles, especially if you're one of those card-carrying white privileged people, because they don't listen to us. We are doing our absolute best, we're dying out there, and they don't listen to us still. So I think it's not just our role, it's everybody's role to get behind this, particularly people who have the privilege of being in spaces that I will never be accepted.
I suppose, I agree totally with that. I think how to do that is a difficult question. It's not necessarily a convenient exercise to do. It's very difficult to implement that idea into practice. I have been trying to do that in my work as well, refugee self-representation or refugee-led kind of decisions. When you're sitting at a table that is comprised of, people who don't necessarily understand the experience, or it's not impact-driven rather than, rhetoric-driven. What do you do to include them? I think the most practical thing that can be done is just to include them at the table. It's simple as that, or it can be as complicated as, breaking down what self-representation means. And I feel like that really comes from the concept of, in this instance, refugees or people seeking asylum are confined to being known as the beneficiary of policies, or beneficiary of, whatever privilege we give them, and not the decision makers at the table who can have agency over deciding what kind of decisions, what kind of policy decisions need to be made about them that will impact their economy. And I think that has been a practice so embedded deeply in our institutions that it's really difficult to reverse really overnight. I think there are steps we can take to improve refugee representation, but it can't be done really easily. It's not the most convenient. It has to shift perceptions over a long period of time for that to happen. In my work, currently actually bringing together refugee advocates from around Australia to be part of one network, to have that voice in policy, to have that voice in public discourse, because that's really the missing link in the design and the engineering of policies.
Yeah, policy is often done to us, not for us, heaven forbid with us. So yeah. Katie, do you have anything?
No, I think just to pick up on a point before around perhaps the example of the power of using images of children in the Khmer Rouge campaign. It is a real tension in this space, and particularly people I work with, perhaps offshore or that are in immigration detention. There's a real fear that the government instills in people, and I'd say it's a legitimate fear that if you speak out, or if you talk to the media, or if you make too much noise, you'll be moved. And I think the government really builds this into the practice of the policy, and it's another way in which people are disempowered and their voice removed. On top of a very deliberately designed physical system of detention in this country and offshore, where it's no coincidence that we detain people thousands of kilometres away, where they are hidden from public eye, and also in an attempt to, for example, limit their ability to communicate with the outside world.
Can I add that as well? Because sometimes it happens really, really badly. And recently, unfortunately, there was a terrible photo of a man and his baby drowned, and that was being shared by refugee organisations here in Australia. The man, his name is Oscar, is from El Salvador. I've had family that have died on that journey to the US from Central America. And we shouldn't need to see the bodies of my dead countrymen to feel sympathy or empathy. We should just know that we should be doing the right thing. So sometimes it happens terribly, and there's no amount of, but they had good intentions that could justify sharing an image like that of something so tragic and personal. When it just to elicit some sort of sympathy or to highlight the crisis.
There's another way in which it becomes commodified, because it's also people that are sharing that image and are viewing that image. It's so removed from them. So why would they look at that as their fellow contributor or as fellow humans? It's another way that underscores what we're talking about.
Yeah, to add to that actually, I had an interesting experience at the infancy level of my advocacy work years ago when I had just started university. The re-emergence of, debates on refugees and asylum seekers, the re-emergence of votes yet again after the Howard era under the Labour government back in 2012, it really got me interested in, refugee policies. One, because, well, I belonged in my immediate community was really the subject of these policies. They were actually the first wave of asylum seekers in the 21st century, in the early 2000s under Howard. My father actually came by boat as well in Australia. So my interest in the advocacy was really premised on real experiences, real impacts on people that I've seen around. And I went to rallies, and we mentioned, good intention, but good intention is not equivalent to good advocacy. There can be good advocacy and bad advocacy. And the prime example was really at that stage where I went to these rallies to inform myself, to connect myself to, other potential advocates. But in those rallies, I'm not challenging, any ideology here, but, my own observation as someone who's connected and seeing real impact in the community. I was seeing series of red flags of socialist alliance, advocates in a refugee support rally. To me, that was mind-boggling. I was confused as to why they were there, whether their intention was to raise support for refugees, to enhance public perception, to raise public support for the cause of refugees. But that to me was counterproductive, because a lot of refugees, for instance, from Afghanistan, post Russian invasion, were made refugees because they wanted to escape communism. Their families were killed. A lot of people went missing. 5,000 people went missing when Russians came to Afghanistan. You had thousands of war rivals from Vietnam who escaped communism, and so yet we have refugee support rally displaying large red flags saying we support refugees. If a refugee had to judge that, refugee would actually turn away and run away from that rally, and they wouldn't necessarily be supported. So I feel like there is a difference between good faith and good advocacy, and that is not reconciled. And it's, I think, purely because there is no engagement. Sometimes there is no engagement with refugees themselves or in the communities at the grassroots level. And although they might want to raise support, but I suppose misinterpreting or actually misdesigning these rallies was a terrible idea, and I actually got put off the second time I attended. In addition to that, there's a lot of foul languages, and I feel like, well, if we are targeting, these particular politicians, you can't really publicly abuse them and then at the same time ask them to meet you for a constructive dialogue. So I saw a lot of contradiction when it came to representation.
Yeah. And I think a lot of different groups try to show solidarity with each other with the progressive movement, and sometimes don't do it in the most productive way. Like Audre Lorde said that there's no such thing as single issue struggles because there are only single issue lives. So how do you guys think we can kind of work between movements a bit more? Like how can the refugee movement work maybe more with other movements, be they the LGBTQI movement, David, or any other movements?
You have that nothing about us without us saying. That, I think that's great. I just think it should just be nothing without us, to be honest. And people don't live single issue lives. I've not met anybody who lives a single issue life. It's hard because it's hard being angry all the time. It's hard caring about something all the time. Sometimes you just want to go home and not care about things. In terms of how do we work better amongst each other, I don't have an easy answer to that, and I think if there was an easy answer to that, it would have already happened. But from my observation anyway, at least particularly like with what I've researched, which is say queer refugees, and asylum seekers, and when you're migrants, it's kind of like queer New Australians, for want of a catch-all term. They're sort of stuck in this weird place in that the support services that they kind of access as sort of mainstream are not really well catered for their queerness because they treat everybody the same, which is a lie. They don't, and they shouldn't, because we don't live solution lives. But then, on the other hand, the queer organisations that exist, health, support, etc., are not really very good with their ethnicity. So they're kind of like forgotten twice. Once, well, they have to make it through the system, which in and of itself is an incredible feat. I mean, the system is designed to break you. And if you are not broken by the time you come out of it, you deserve all and every accolade that you have to give. But then you have these people who are sort of stuck in the middle because there's a lot of, I call it sort of organisational ego, you know, like, oh no, we're really cool with gay people because we treat everybody the same. So not everybody's the same. And that goes the same with queer organisations. We're really good with like the brown people because we treat everybody the same because we know what it's like to be discriminated against. However, some of the most racist spaces I've been in sort of very queer spaces and overtly racist, not even pretending to be otherwise. So I think, I mean, to sort of not answer your question, we need to sort of step back and take a bit of stock as to why we're doing something. And be really aware of our power in a situation, especially if we're working in an organisation that is in the service of people, or is meant to be. And ask yourself if you're really actually doing that thing. And it really goes back to asking the people who you want to work with. Because as an advocate, you're not working for anybody. You're not anybody's voice. They have a voice. You just have to give them the microphone. So make sure that the resources that are at your disposal are actually put to the use of the people who actually need them. Too many times, particularly in sort of queer places or even just mainstream organisations that want to work with queer people, they hold a lot of resources, even just in terms of connections to people. But those aren't shared with the people that actually need them because of what you said about these people are the recipients of our sympathy and our work and not actually the change makers. We just need to see more hot women leading, really, to be honest, because they have the best attitude.
I would have to say, well, we need to ensure that our advocacy and the collaboration that actually happens in the refugee sector is aligned with political realities on the ground. Post-election period is different to, before pre-election period. We will have this government for the next 3 years. We might have it for another term. So what can we do realistically? What can we do in a measured and more achievable way? There aren't many things that we can achieve in terms of policy outcomes. But what we can do is try and work together to build up research, to build up evidence, to build up practical alternatives and forward to the government and genuinely try to collaborate constructively with the government of the day. And like I said, we can't really contradict ourselves and abuse the particular politicians. Probably that's my individual view. But I suppose simple logic will tell you that they will turn away from you, they will break dialogues and they will close the doors for you. I think in the next 3 years, what we can do as a sector is to collaborate really closely together, as the sector did with Kids of Nauru campaign. It was not just the role of litigants to succeed in that campaign. It was the role of whole society, role of refugees with lived experience, role of doctors, experts, everyone. And I think if our campaigning, if we go forward in that kind of collaborative, constructive mode, there is a prospect of success. And even if it's not a major success, we have to, I think, compromise on some of our ambitions. We do not have to change our goals, but we need to be more realistic. We do not need to change the principles, but we need to actually carry out our advocacy in a more principled, achievable manner.
I think there's something quite dangerous where a campaigner
or you're an Aboriginal rights activist, and how you think intersectionality works in a way that could be successfully advanced?
I don't know. I think as lawyers, we're really bad at talking about. We're the only people who try to sell a cake by selling the recipe. We're like, wow, the rules are amazing, or the rules need to change, and you really need to get this cake because it's got X amount of eggs and whatever. We're not really good at because that's what the law school doesn't teach about. To sort of, well, actually start selling the cake. And I think that in terms of sort of intersectionality and working together, I don't know, because maybe I'm just really jaded and birch. But I can tell you when it's worked really well. It's when we're actually not so much focused on who you are, what brought you here, what's your issue, but more about, well, what's the outcome? Like, what's the well-being in the community that you want to see? In fact, just selling the cake based on its deliciousness, not on its recipe. I know that a lot of organisations do it really well. I think Human Rights Law Centre does it really well with working with a lot of people, and not just the people affected, but civil society, academics, other lawyers, politicians. It's just important to work together, but also just sort of realise that it's the outcome that we need to be focused on, not oh, I'm here because this is my issue. Because that will only get you so far. Because there will come a time where you're just going to need someone else. So I think the best way to do that is to focus on what it is that you want to see. Like, what is the outcome that you want to see? What is the community that you want to see? And why? And focus on selling that. Also, because ultimately, anyone who tries to argue with you as to why you can't have a good community is a bit of an a-hole. So, like, focusing on the outcome instead of just the process and this is my issue and you will not take it away from me. It's more about, well, it's the outcome that we want to see, not the process that we're interested in.
Katie, you mentioned how, like, on a global level, Australia gets away with a lot of things, which isn't really a secret to anyone in terms of, like, offshore detention, and I think it's like a friend of mine recently went to the UN was like, Australia is known for a country that's got imprisons their refugees. What do you think some of the challenges at a global level are, this is to anyone, of us solving the problem? Like, in a world that's so globalised, why are we still getting away with the way we treat refugees?
I mean, I think the interesting thing in all that is, the way you tell that there and the way we conceptualise that in the room isn't that such a shameful thing? I mean, the reality is Australia's a world leader in this space in a way that's really being marketed in a terrifying capacity.
Yeah.
A lot of countries, our former Prime Minister Tony Abbott goes on the speaking circuit around the world to sort of talk about leading this space. Some of you would have seen the tweets that Trump put out a few weeks ago, being Scott Morrison on offshore detention camps. So it is actually quite a terrifying thing. Happy to hand over the panel in terms of how we solve that.
I feel like there is a huge double standard, and that is, obviously Australia on the one hand priding itself globally that it's one of the most successful, it has one of the most successful refugee settlement program. But on the other hand, that's really off. Of course, it's not reflected to any degree in the asylum system it has. And nobody questions that. And I think that's a huge disparity between the asylum system and our refugee resettlement. Although we do say that Australia is a leader in resettlement, it's only 45th overall across the board. And countries like Turkey, Pakistan, Sudan, Eritrea, and Germany, they are the top countries who resettle refugees and are pretty generous. And there is obviously not a lot of criticism in terms of how we do resettle refugees once they do get here through our humanitarian program. But then you have a huge divide between, who they are good refugees, they come through a humanitarian program, they've lined up for years, and they're now being resettled. But then when it comes to asylum seekers, we suppose that they are bad refugees, although they may have the same claims. I mean, a lot of people who are seeking asylum, historically, actually, in my case, my dad came by boat, and we came through the humanitarian program. In our case, my dad would be a bad refugee, and I would be a good refugee. So I waited in the queue, as if there was a queue. And so there is that contradiction, but I feel like that is not questioned. It is being questioned, at least the detention aspect of our policy is being questioned at the global level. But the asylum system should be, criticized and questioned a little bit more. But in terms of, global leadership, I suppose there are a lot of potential for Australia. Australia can be, a regional leader, trying to address the root causes of displacement in a regional country, using its diplomacy, using its leadership globally. But it's not. And I suppose when it comes to programs like community support program, there's a huge potential for us to increase that or capacitate that a little bit more, just like so that is, which is community owned. There are potentials, but I'm not sure if there is political will there.
Yeah. And away from a global level at home, we talked a little bit about the broad policies that kind of stacked against refugees. What do you think we should be, how should we be reforming those?
I think statistics are part of the problem in some ways, in terms of picking up on what you're just talking about, because politicians, for example, love to get into this sort of argument over most generous, where we're ranking, and when you actually unpack that, of course you realise that a lot of that is fairly misleading. But as soon as you get into statistics, numbers, citations, we're dehumanising people.
Yeah.
We're not thinking of people as people, and we're not thinking of people as people like you and me. And I think that's a huge problem in the way we talk about this. It's kind of being touched on already. I think another big issue in Australia is this island mentality we have. And I think, if you're lucky enough to spend a bit of time overseas, it's really, you get really reminded of it in that, both in relation to this siege mentality we've got, that there's going to be boats coming across the ocean and we can protect our borders. I mean, that's quite a unique geographical situation that large chunks of the rest of the world are in a very different situation with land border crossings and conflict on their doorstep. But I think it also means that we've been able to sort of insulate ourselves from the global reality of what is happening in the world, with the sheer number of people that are being forcibly displaced from their homes every single day. As we're sitting here right now, this is happening. And so I think it's reshaping this, the way we think about this, the way we talk about it, the way we relate to this radically, so that we're understanding that we're part of a global situation at the moment, and we're part of a global situation where we have obligations and care for people as well as humans.
I think also understanding the history of where and why we're here. This is, we exported the idea of apartheid to South Africa, and also President 45, right? He's basically just ripping right out of Border Fast's media releases. Because we are really good at this. In fact, and we have to also remember that the fact that we have a international law around refugees and asylum seeking is because of the horrors of World War II. And even then, there was an article, not an article, a cartoon in the newspaper when that was announced here in Australia. And it showed good migrants leaving Australia and bad migrants coming out of boats, and the bad migrants were the survivors, the Holocaust, except they were drawn as rats. And that was a cartoon that appeared in one of our papers when this policy of actually being more open to people who have fled the most traumatic thing happened. Australia's got a history of doing this. We can talk to any First Nations person. So we can't sort of pretend that it's not about us. we can't pretend that we can't influence it either. Because as you said, the people who make these decisions in the government are elected locally. They are your local members of parliament. You can ask them to do something. You can put your position forward, you can organise, you can tell them you don't like them in very colourful terms if you so choose, and only go so far. But we have to also think that a global solution has to also have a local solution. Because we are all in a capacity to do something, whether it's as passive as signing an online petition to literally chaining yourself to your member of parliament's office, and everything in between. But it's not something that happens out there. The fact that we think that it happens out there is part of the problem. I was listening to Lee Carney speak as well. She was talking about how, well, for most Australians it's not raining, so they think the roof is fine. But it is raining for a lot of people. And just because it's not raining for you where you are right now doesn't mean it's not raining. And the integrity of that roof is important for every single one of you. Because if it fails for the people who are least powerful, it can absolutely fail for you. And that won't really matter until it's raining for you, and by then it's way too late.
One thing I would add to the wonderful things that you said is, we need to try and take the political heat out of this discussion. How to do that is difficult because this whole, refugee discourse is based on political intentions and the concept of, political football. But going back to the recent history, how Vietnamese people were given reception in Australia, it really did come, from local politicians who actually said welcome to the very first boat refugee, and that echoed throughout the country, and it really won public sentiment for the rest of the Vietnamese cohort that came by boat. Obviously it came from the fact that Australia was involved in the Vietnam War, and to some degree we empathized with the Vietnamese refugees more, so with refugees who come from a country where we don't actually have a working history. But that is not true with cohorts that come from Afghanistan. Australia has been involved in that war for 17 years. In Iraq, we were there for many years. Why don't we have the same empathy for Iraqi refugees or Afghan refugees or refugees who come from countries where we have fought? I think it does then go back to political debate, political framing of welcoming asylum seekers like those. And if you can actually go back and reverse a little bit and learn from the model of welcoming Vietnamese to Australia, to now actually then reflecting that back to at least the legacy caseload who came by boat, I think we will be moving a little bit forward than the current situation.
What do you think changed in the narrative between then and now? Like, why did the shift happen? I know, David, you said that it's been part of our whole history, but it has gotten markedly worse. What do you think changed that?
It goes back to really the framing. We didn't have things like illegal refugees. That was really coined out later on when Howard came in, and that came in the shadow of September 11th. The whole securitization that came as an aftermath to securing our borders from potential terrorists that would come from countries like Afghanistan and Iraq and other countries in the Middle East. And then that changed the debate, and I think that was coincidental to the election times, and that was used. It was successful, and the successive governments have used that ever since. With the Vietnamese group, we welcomed them. We said they are victims of communism, they're victims of war, and we need to protect them. I think it all goes back to really the language that they refer to. As simple as that. I mean, the concept of illegal is really it's a dangerous word. I think George Orwell says it well. He says that if thoughts can shape language, language can too shape thought. And I think that's really how we can conclude how this all happened.
I'm really interested in this group analogy though, because I think one of the things I really struggle with in terms of watching the progressive encroachment and degradation of people's rights in this space is what that actually means for everybody's rights. And it's textbook, we've seen it one time again in history. You attack minority group in a way that the sort of comfortable majority think, oh, look, it's not ideal, but it's not affecting me, and I don't really need to think about it. But what we're really seeing in this country is deeply, deeply concerning in terms of the attack on the rule of law and the seeping encroachment we're seeing that is, I would argue, already flowing across into various other areas. The incredible powers that the Minister in the Department of Home Affairs has, everybody should be deeply, deeply concerned about it. And I think you're right, it's that nobody wakes up until their roof is leaking, which is a really unfortunate thing, and we've sort of talked about it, why is it that we're not relating to people who are necessarily humanised as refugees sitting on Manus Island, they're actually people like you and me. But I think we're seeing that flow-on effect, and I think it's really terrifying for what's going on.
I don't think anyone can claim that they didn't know what we were doing either. They just didn't care enough. Because we know what's happening, at least even just on a surface level, and that surface level is appalling. But we didn't do it because we just didn't care. Or not enough of us did something. And we can't get away with the fact that we didn't know, because this is happening in the shadow of the Australian flag. And it's, I don't know, maybe I am being jaded, but we need to understand that these things are actually happening to all of us. Just yesterday, the bill that's passed through the lower house, that Peter Dutton, on his own whim, can say that, well, I don't want an Australian citizen to return to Australia because I say so. And not just me, a naturalised Australian citizen, but a citizen nonetheless. Any one of you that is an Australian citizen that was born here can be denied entry because the Minister for Home Affairs said so. And that is terrifying. That should terrify every single one of you. But it's a sort of, it's really gradual, and then it happens all at once. And that's really worrying.
I agree with that. It's almost like, sometimes I want to shake, I think it's a balance in Australia at the moment between incredible advocacy, but also compassion fatigue, which I think is a real challenge in this space. That, sometimes I want to shake people. Do you realise what happened in Canberra today? I mean, nerd, but the thing is like huge waves of doing it.
In tied to that, I think the compassion is really missing, because if we look back at the incidents in Nauru and Manus Island, some of the refugees burned themselves to death because they were so desperate. They were driven to actually burn themselves alive, and yet we have the minister saying, well, no, he was just trying to come to Australia. He has died. He can no longer come to Australia. He did not have that incentive. But I think that, and then the public agrees. I think it goes to the fact that the public side has been so deeply, this debate is deeply lacking affection to the point that we are completely immune to another human being suffering. The same response wasn't even, to the body, drug dealers who were being, punished, for punishment in Indonesia. The whole nation arose, despite the fact that they had actually committed a crime. Yet refugees who are in Australia, or actually in the islands, it does not spark the same kind of sympathy. And it's an unfortunate sort of affair.
David, do you think your cake analogy extends to a really negative outcome? So if you don't do this, then you're going to have this gross cake that really tastes bad. If you do this, you'll have this great society.
Yeah.
Or do you think that's not as
I don't know, maybe not. I don't think so. I mean, who's going to buy a gross cake, right?
Yeah, but you can stop it while it's being baked.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think I sort of struggled with, the sort of logical part of my brain, however small it might be, of just, if only we just show people are going to know and they're going to care. But I don't think that's true. But I think language has a lot to do with it regardless, right? Because the bill that went through about, stopping any Australian citizen from returning back to Australia was actually called the Foreign Fighters Bill. right? Because you can't argue against that. I don't want foreign fighters in here. That on the top level sounds pretty good. But the actual detail is where they get to.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the cake analogy is a good one, but it does go back to, well, language and the way that we're speaking about people is really problematic. And it's leading to really terrible outcomes, not just for the brown people amongst us, but all of us.
Well, on that cheerful note, we might move to audience questions. So there are some roving mics around. If you have a question, just raise your hand and someone will make their way to you.
Thank you for this panel. It's quite useful information. It's always awesome listening to lawyers talk. All I listen to is art and music, and it doesn't seem so pragmatic. But from what I'm hearing is that from the entire panel that there's a lot of emphasis on the intersectionalities of our identities, but I almost never hear about the interconnections and intersections of our struggles. And I was wondering, because we're fighting, we seem to be fighting on the same front, but we're fighting from different sides, and I was wondering if there's more pragmatic ways to tackle this issue. How can we consolidate our issues, or how can we fight on the same front without seeming to be all fighting in different times and different things? I didn't articulate it very well, but
I don't know. Please tell me, and I'd love to do that. No, but I think you're right. I think you're right. We're not. Our structures are not sort of such that allow us to kind of get together, right? Whether they be funding structures, definitely in our line of work, community law, public interest law, but across any sort of advocacy. Because together we're actually really powerful and very dangerous to people who have decision-making power. I think, it might even sort of sound antagonistic, but it's definitely about kind of getting together like this. And I know in my line of work, getting together in relationship building is what we call it. It's not a funded activity. We have to sort of do that on our own. I think definitely hearing from each other so we understand each other, so we can walk together, that's critical. Because otherwise we would fall into the same thing that I'm asking people not to do, of reducing people to an idea or a transaction or whatever. And the more we can continue talking to each other, the better off we're going to be. I don't know if that's an end point, it definitely is a starting point. To launch into other bigger and better things. Because there is absolutely no social movement that has garnered more than 5% of support in the general population that has failed. All we need is 5% of us to make change happen. So you can see why keeping us separate is something that people who have the money want to do. And I probably shouldn't have said that in fact.
Just a really minor point. I think this shouldn't be taken for granted that we need to be showing respect between ourselves within our various causes in order to advance those causes. And I think it's like having realistic discussions, but I think that's often overlooked and assumed in that even when we try and fight for the cause, each and every one of us might be dealing with some form of discrimination, be it sex-based, be it race-based, in and of itself that's adding to that burden and that weight that necessarily inhibits your ability to be progressive outwardly as well. So,
the only thing I would add is really mutual learning, I suppose, learning all of the good practices from each other. There's just a huge potential for all of that expertise and knowledge to be brought together across spectrum and then be used for, something that will achieve.
Thank you My question is for Shukufa. I'm so sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. I don't know who I am. Pronounce my name. I think it's fascinating that you've mentioned about some of the sort of the grassroots groups like the Socialist Alliance group, which I know have sort of advocated and en masse turned up in their rallies with sort of their red flags and stuff. And it's a really interesting viewpoint to see that a refugee might not, you know, think that that's sort of helpful to them. It's interesting. I mean, I agree with you to about 50% of that. I'm not sure because there's a lot of the grassroots have been responsible for things like, I guess, the Medivac bill, you know, which now Morrison's thinking about overturning. So and with the collective, the doctors getting together and the petitions and all of that stuff. So, like, as a medical practitioner and a refugee advocate, I want to know, what would you rather do? Would you rather sort of the grassroots groups support the refugees en masse without their flags and so hence not advertise themselves so much, rather the cause? And what are your thoughts now on where we go next in terms of if Morrison takes away this tiny iota of hope, the Medivac bill? What next? Like, where do we go from there?
Well, in terms of the Socialist Alliance and that I mentioned, like I said, I don't challenge them on the level of ideology at all. But I suppose the messaging of that, like, what's the rationale of the refugee support rally to actually convince the unconvinced public to join their support? Otherwise, I don't understand the rationale of public disobedience in that sense, or public protest, not just rally, protest against certain political individuals. And so I felt, I mentioned because there was a huge contradiction, huge disconnect for me in terms of its impact. I think it goes back to, the Australian public generally, they fear communism, they used to fear communism, and I don't think, popular public opinion would favour Socialist Alliance. I just don't understand to what degree they are convincing people, and in my opinion, absolutely, refugee communities would be fearful of any socialist movement. They escape that kind of stuff from their own country. And so with me, Medivac bill, that was the only hope. There was a lot of effort going into it. And it's just uncertain until November. There's have to see what happens.
I actually think, just to jump in on Medivac, I think it's not, I don't think it's the only hope. I think actually it's a really good example of a number of different groups coming together to work together, and it's been so fantastic to have this medically led by doctors, because what we're talking about here is doctors actually making decisions about medical treatment for people offshore rather than bureaucrats, and rather than, I'm a lawyer, I'm the first to say that lawyers shouldn't be needed to be involved in this. We shouldn't be having to run up to court day in and day out to get people basic medical care. That's a really good example of groups coming together. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the Medivac bill was actually repealed in the House yesterday. It will now go to the Senate, and there's a Senate inquiry, and everybody should take some time to have a look at that and think about making a submission. But I think the Medivac bill is one important piece of this, but what we need is a much bigger structural response to offshore detention as well.
Absolutely. Ultimately, you would want regime change and changes to offshore detention policies. We don't want to warehouse refugees down in the offshore detentions, but whether that's achieved or reform or not in the near future, that's it.
I think in response to that too, I would ask myself who is the grassroots in this case, because there are lots of different grassroots organisations, lots of different issues, and if there was a group of people who are refugees organising that protest who came from diverse backgrounds, because we're not a homogenous population, then someone from that group probably would have pointed out that this isn't appropriate, whereas if it was being organised by someone who had no lived experience, they probably wouldn't have been able to point things like that out, and so making sure that the grassroots orgs are actually orgs that send to those with lived experience.
Monash University. So I just want to make maybe more of a comment than a question, because the issue of race and why Australia has come up. And I just have a couple of thoughts. So one, I think in some standard tellings of Australian history and Australian culture, there's a danger of treating what was an ideology as if it was a reality. And we've talked about race and First Nations, but equally people of colour have been part of the colonial aspect of Australian history since it began. And there's a lot in Australian history telling that tries to elide that or deny that or wipe that out, but it's not true. And there were, members of the African diaspora have been in Australia since 1788. They were being born in Australia all through between 1788 and the repeal of White Australia. So I think we have to be careful in our framing of Australian history and treating an ideological project as if it was a reality, and then letting that forgetting and eliding colour the way we talk about where Australia needs to go. And the other comment I wanted to make is that we've heard quotes both from Angela Davis and Andrew Lord, and I think in Australian political practice we still have some way to go in asking how we're relating to a Black American, particularly Black American Women's Liberation Project, and what the role is of us borrowing or learning from that project, and how we can do that in a way which is helpful but also acknowledges, particularly if it's white activists, and in my case white male activists, who are sometimes perhaps leaning heavily without due acknowledgement on the liberation project of Black American women.
I don't know. I guess there wasn't a question, but okay, thank you. But yeah, you're right about borrowing from the US and so on. But man, we've got some amazing women of colour right here doing some amazing stuff. And that is all true. What you're saying, yes, there's been people of colour here and etc. But white people have actually made history. I never learned about any of that in school, leading to the point where I was like, well, obviously Aboriginal people still exist, growing up here, So I get your point, but the overwhelming narrative was written by white people, and it is their story that we tell because that's what we are told is important. So we also need to challenge that.
I don't think the issue is necessarily about existing, it's about who has the power. And there's a difference between populations existing and populations having power.
Thank you. My name is Jude and I'm a third year law and global studies student at Monash University, and I just want to say thank you all for being here and giving us the opportunity to listen to your insight. My question is to all three of you. We've spoken a lot today about a number of pressing human rights issues that require immediate action and solutions which I aspire to contribute to in my future career. And this topic in particular, Australia's treatment of refugees and asylum seekers, is very close to my heart because my family and I were lucky enough to be accepted into Melbourne a few years ago and escaped the Syrian civil war. And so as I've progressed through my law degree, I've realised that there's almost a pressure to get a clerkship and work for a top-tier commercial law firm. That's what everyone wants to do. And I haven't really come across an avenue or a career pathway that will, for working in human rights or for getting me where I originally, I enrolled into this degree to do. And so my question is, how can we address that? And do you have any advice for myself and any other law students that might be in the same position as me as to how we shouldn't lose track of this passion for social change and human rights and not slip away into the corporate world?
If I could go first. I don't think there's a formula for how you can naturally transition into the area you're passionate about. For me, it wasn't a calculated, based on formula. I did not actually follow the unit structures like I did third year in the first year of my law degree. So I actually, which isn't actually the best idea. passionate about it, and most importantly because it has been meaningful for me, it has served some type of meaning. And I would, I equally would not be satisfied in a commercial law setting, going back and forth to the court chambers. But what I actually did, what got me to do the law degree in the first place was really, a real case scenario. So I have this funny story to tell. I was actually doing Bachelor of Psychological Science first year, and at that time I was getting a little bit interested in the refugee issues. I was checking the news and I was reading the articles. And then someone from the community who was an asylum seeker still, but had applied for permanent protection then, who was rejected by the department and had to appeal to the Refugee Review Tribunal. He came to me and assumed that I had, legal expertise. So because I had done work history in high school and I had based my whole research project on Mahatma Gandhi, the real sense of justice, I saw the real sense of justice in his case. I read his case back to front, and I was getting into the spirit of Mahatma Gandhi. I was thinking, someone has to continue that legacy. And so I just went, oh no, but I didn't see any limitation. That's all I am trying to say. So I attempted at actually writing a legal submission in response to a rejection letter, which was extremely ambitious, and I hope that they haven't placed that on record anywhere. That would be used against me. But yeah, a pro bono lawyer actually came to the rescue. I just don't know what would have happened if they went ahead with that legal submission of mine. But that exposed me to a whole heap of things that I wasn't aware. I understood what Refugee Review Tribunal did. I understood what the issues were. I understood the refugee, determination process, what was required, what was blocked. By just communicating with the lawyers, I limited myself to just being the interpreter in that case. I didn't want to be, equivalent to the lawyer who was helping him. So that got me really interested in the legal side of things. And in light of, seeing just the rallies and just sometimes the ineffectiveness of it, it led me to actually working directly with, community legal centers at that point, RACs, Solvers, Legal, and I got in touch with people on the ground, but also solicitors, and that really, I think, deepened my knowledge and my passion to then I naturally landed in policy role later on, before finishing my law degree. So there isn't really a perfect formula to follow. I think you just have to get involved, immerse yourself in that issue, get involved voluntarily, speak to experts in that area, and actually meet someone who is going through a certain policy issue, and that's the route will naturally lead you somewhere meaningful.
This is terrible advice, but you just have to be stupid in the right way. And when I say that, it just sort of means like fearless and a little just involved. I studied anthropology actually, and you know how much demand there is for anthropologists in Australia? 0. And then I went to law school because I thought I could do this. Because I went to the magistrate's court in year 12, and I was like, I don't know what these people are saying. Because I'm not very good at being told that I can't do something. So then I did law school to sort of spite myself. And then, but I think I've always landed in things. I did no clerkships, none whatsoever. I got a great position that lasted 6 months because it broke me. I'm working in a commercial law firm, and then I went to work as a gym instructor for a year because I'm a very overqualified gym instructor. With $100,000 next year, because I hated it, because I didn't actually find my thing. I thought the law was going to be about justice, and it was absolutely not about justice at all. It was about billing people a lot of money. At least it was at my firm. But then, I think what's really helped me kind of get through all of that was I like to have a sense of purpose. And the law found me. I didn't find it. The law found me because I was, from age 5, designated as a person who is a refugee, and my passport was stamped as such. Politics found me. I didn't become political. Politics happened to me. So So I think all of my life combined with just needing to have a purpose has led me to find some really interesting work. I have not had a career path. There was no one to follow, which is terrifying. But there is absolutely a job for you in like community law and public interest law. Absolutely there is.
I think I just reiterate very similar. I was adamant. I never wanted to be a lawyer, and I did an arts degree, and then was volunteering at a community legal centre. That's my arts degree, and it was the first time I thought, actually, hang on a minute, maybe always being passionate about social justice. I thought maybe that's an avenue. So a bit similar. I did a law degree to complement my arts degree, which is normally the other way around, and found a lot of the law really infuriating. And I think I've just really harnessed that rage and that's kept me going. Because I think you've always got to have an element. If you want to work in this space, you've got to constantly question the norm. But just to reiterate, I was very adamant I didn't want to work at a commercial firm. I think it's much harder for you guys coming through now. I really feel for you. It's really hard. But I think there are pathways, and I'm always happy to talk to you about it or talk to others about it. But just sounds so naff, but just like carve your own path. You'll make it work.
Yeah, and you have a strong foundation to start. I think you have lived the realities, you have lived inequities and fairness and justice. And I think you're best placed to do this work. That was true for me. I was someone who had actually lived these realities. It wasn't a concept of fairness or justice in theory form. In reality, I really wanted to actually reverse the outcomes of the situations like the Taliban dictated in Afghanistan. As a little girl, I saw that brutality, and that sense of justice was real for me. So I continued.
If you've lived there, no one can lie to you about it. And look after yourself.
Yeah.
Because it's freaking hard. Yeah, so sometimes not all for you. Just go home and come home.
Okay, so unfortunately that's all we've got time for. So if you could all join me in thanking